Well, it was built as the first garden suburban area in the late 1800s. The business leaders were looking for a place to move from downtown Atlanta, were looking for new development, new terrain, and decided on Inman Park and took the Inman Park trolley barn, which is on Edgewood Avenue, and straightened the Edgewood Avenue from the trolley barn to 5 Points. So they straightened it and put in a trolley line. So it was a very limited, but that was our initial rapid transit in Atlanta. The original plan of the neighborhood was very well laid out, and the streets were designed by Joel Hurt and the other developers with input from the Frederick Law Olmsted landscape design firm in Boston. At that time it was the son of Frederick Law Olmsted, and who had designed Central Park. But the Springvale Park in Inman Park, which is this focal point of the old neighborhood, was designed by them. Somewhere in the maybe 50s, the neighborhood started going down because people who were the wealthy families here had started moving to farther out Piedmont and out Peachtree into Druid Hills, and the neighborhood, the big houses here were subdivided into apartments. So some of the big houses on Edgewood and Euclid, Elizabeth Street, the big Victorians were subdivided into multifamily units. One of the houses had been made into 16 different apartments. Each room was an apartment. Most of the homes at that time were owned by slumlords or absentee homeowners. That progressed in the 50s and the 60s until the late 60s, when Robert Griggs, on a wet, rainy afternoon, he was on a bus coming to do an appraisal of leaded glass and stained glass windows. On the bus, drove by that house and saw it, jumped off the bus, and it ended up being the home that Robert Griggs bought on Euclid Avenue. And it's a big Queen Anne Victorian, beautiful home. And he was the beginning, the start of Inman Park, at that time called Inman Park Restoration. And the people who were involved in the early days of renovating homes followed in Robert Griggs's footsteps. The phase that really had the biggest impact on Inman Park was when the Georgia Department of Transportation planned to build a toll road from downtown Atlanta eventually to Athens, Georgia, where the university is. And the business leaders in DeKalb County wanted a better way to get business people from the airport to DeKalb County and then on to counties farther east. And so the Department of Transportation had this plan to build a toll road, and that plan started in the 50s. I first heard about the Stone Mountain Toll Road in 1964. I grew up in Druid Hills, and my parents received a letter from the Georgia Department of Transportation telling them that this interstate was going to be built at the top of their street, which was Ponce de Leon Avenue, and that the first two houses on the street would be taken by eminent domain and destroyed, and that there would be a 12-foot chain link fence 4 feet outside my parents' bedroom window. So that was my introduction to the Stone Mountain Toll Road. There were about 217 acres that were cleared for the Stone Mountain Toll Road. And the last house that was torn down in Inman Park was in 1971, the year I moved here. And it was Judge Pye's home on what is now Poplar Circle, which is south of the Inman Park MARTA station, where the I-485 was going through Inman Park. So we had two roads that were having a detrimental impact on the neighborhood and creating a situation that was contributing to the flight of the homeowners, because they were concerned that this expressway was going to have a detrimental impact on the neighborhood, and in fact it did. when Jimmy Carter was running for governor and then subsequently became governor, he helped kill the toll road because it was going to be a massive road that was going to wipe out the Olmsted Parks in Druid Hills and connect up with Scott Boulevard and then what is now Stone Mountain Freeway. So that road was massive and really detrimental. So Carter helped kill that road. But when he became president and then ended his term as president, looking around for a site to build his library, he and his people chose Copenhagen, which was the site of the viewing of the Battle of Atlanta. According to federal law, any land that is taken with federal funds has to be used for transportation purposes. So that was the key factor, that when Carter was looking for a place for his library, he was able to use that law to get the land as long as he had a highway component attached to it. And so the highway component became what Andy Young and Jimmy Carter and the other powers that be at the Department of Transportation evolved into the Presidential Parkway. And that was not as big a road as the Stone Mountain Toll Road, but it still had 7 bridges through the neighborhood, dead ending into Ponce de Leon, where it would have destroyed the Olmsted Parks in Druid Hills. And that was the point at which the neighborhoods really became galvanized, was with the announcement of the Presidential Parkway. Andy Young had run for mayor of Atlanta and gotten a lot of support from the in-town neighborhoods, running on a platform of no road. And we really thought that he was going to help us implement the Great Park Plan and have the land used for park purposes and housing. But the week after his inauguration, he came out in support of the Presidential Parkway.
I think that you got a group of true believers that are waging what they feel to be a kind of a crusade. And we've been very tolerant, and nobody's decided to take them on. And I think we're paying a price for it.
So we felt very betrayed, and that he had used his office and used us to get elected, and had formed an allegiance with Jimmy Carter and the Department of Transportation to destroy the in-town neighborhoods. So we galvanized at that point and formed an organization of the neighborhoods most impacted by the Presidential Parkway. So the group was called Caution, and it stood for Citizens Against Unnecessary Thoroughfares in Older Neighborhoods. And I think that was 1981. And at the same time, there was a group called the Roadbusters, which was the activist group that demonstrated, stood in front of bulldozers. You know, they became the active group. Caution became the legal group, the leadership fundraising group.
So by being here today, you're making it plain and crystal clear that this is our land, and we will struggle, we will fight, we will do whatever it takes to keep this land and pass it on to the next generation.
We were young, we were professional, we thought that we had a lot to contribute to the city, we were enthusiastic about renovating, and yet the powers that be in our city did not understand the importance of historic neighborhoods.
If necessary, you must be prepared, all of us, to withdraw our support from those people who support this road, because this road is evil.
During the road fight, we saw a need to become designated as a historic neighborhood, so we went through the process of getting our historic designation through the federal and state levels. And then when the city of Atlanta finally developed historic regulations, we became one of the 3 levels of historic neighborhoods. So we are a landmark district.
This is perhaps one of the most political roads in the history of the state of Georgia, probably one of the most political roads in the history of this country, and one of the most expensive.
We began early to realize that having officials elected to office who would support the neighborhoods was a vital concern. So we made a very concerted effort to get politicians elected to office who would help us and help us stop the road. Stop the road was our slogan, and we kept it simple. All the neighborhoods could unify over stop the road. Not what were we going to do in the future and what was the plan going to be, but stop the road. Stop the ex-presway was one of the things we called it, since it was the ex-president's freeway. And so we eventually got 54 people elected to office. So with 54 people elected to office, even our governor, Zell Miller at the time, could see that the tide was turning. The court system also, I think, was influenced to some degree by the fact that we had won a few lawsuits, we had lost lawsuits, but it was time to get this thing resolved. And so Judge Seeliger in the Superior Court in DeKalb County ordered a mediation. So through court-ordered mediation, Caution, the City of Atlanta, and the Georgia Department of Transportation sat down and mediated what was eventually Freedom Parkway. And so the reason it ends at Moreland was because that was how we ended up with a design for a road that was more like a parkway. After the design of the road, Caution evolved into the Freedom Park Conservancy, and that was the organization that was given the authority to come up with the plan for the park, the bike jog paths, and all of the parkland that surrounds the parkway. The 217 acres is the largest tract of land in a city in the country to be developed as green space. So from 1964 until the Freedom Parkway completion in the 90s was the span over which we were fighting one variety of road or another, either the toll road, the Presidential Parkway, and then the design and completion of Freedom Parkway.
So 30-year fight?
I grew up with it.